I'm Amy.
Hi, I'm Neil.
And I'm Will Ben, and today for World Suicide Prevention Day, we have Neil and Amy here to talk about their own experiences with suicidal ideation and depression. And if you had 30 days to get yourself out of the slump, what would you do?
Yeah. So I suppose we both, when we met, it was kind of quite funny in a sense that we had similar thought processes.
Absolutely.
You know, and when you're down there, it's just there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's not really, you don't know if you do want to take your life, but you do feel, I think you're the same, it's your last resort.
Absolutely. And I think even when we were describing the feeling of suicidal ideation and that level of depression, it was really similar, because I compare it to being in a well and being at the bottom of a well and being able to hear almost like a children's playground in the background, and you can hear the children laughing and you can hear the birds twittering, but it's so far away, and the light, you can just about make it out, but it just feels like you're so alone at the bottom of this well kind of experience. What was yours like? Because you compared it to something similar.
It was I tell a story of going to Galway when I was 6 years of age, and we stayed in a hotel room for Christmas. And that evening, as they did back then, parents would go down to the restaurant to have something to eat, but I was in the suite, and you know, it was dark, and I woke up and called for my mother, but no one appeared, and you know, kept calling, get more anxious, and I was there, I'll jump out of the bed. But when you're young, jumping out of the bed is a big thing, because monsters under the bed. But I went to the door, and you know, when it's dark, you can't find the handle sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I couldn't find the handle. I could see light under the door from the corridor or the next room, but I couldn't find the handle, and I was getting more anxious and screaming, and it just felt like I couldn't get out, and there was no way out until someone heard my screams. But I could hear people outside, as you just said. Absolutely. Outside my room, something's going on, but I can't reach them. How do I reach them? And I think, but with suicidal thoughts, I had them every day since I was 15, countless times a day, and you just think, I've tried everything, you know, and this life isn't for me. It's as flippant as that this life isn't for me. It's just, and I said it was time to close my eyes to the world.
Absolutely.
You know, and you don't think of who you leave behind, because you just think that this is what I have to do right now.
And it's like a magnet. Like, I was the exact same. I've had suicidal ideation since I was 15, and it's that draw to just not exist. It's just this absolute desire to have an absence of pain. But then on the other hand, you're also so numb that it's just a sense of feeling anything. And I find it so fascinating that the reason we connected was that we just had such a similar experience of that light is there, but it's unattainable, it's unreachable. And I guess that's why we're here today. We're trying to talk about how people can access that light, how, you know, you can climb out of the well, you can open the door. It's just like finding out the tools and the ways to do that, and that's why we're here today.
Exactly. And so you listening to us, what does it bring up any questions, or can you understand what we're saying, or is it kind of whoa?
One of the questions for me that I would have is, what would be the difference between, you know, just having an extended period of, you know, things not going in your direction versus actually being clinically depressed? Was there a certain point where you ever went from, oh, I'm having a bad day, but you kept having bad days every day? Was there a point at which you were like, I'm not having a bad day, I'm actually depressed?
I actually think that's the stigma, and what you're saying is very close to the stigma around mental health, because for years I was having suicidal thoughts every day, and I didn't consider myself depressed or that there was anything wrong with me. And you know, 2 in 3 people suffering from a mental illness will never seek professional help. And I think that's such a reality, that if you're having repeatedly dark days over and over and over again, whether it's bad things happening in your life or you're just submerged into the darkness, you know, that is very likely to be depression or something along those lines, because it isn't normal to feel that dark. It isn't healthy. It's not a healthy perspective to be that dark.
So I went to PA the House when I eventually talked 21 years later about my mental health problems, and I used to think I had something up here, some brain, but my counsellor, who was great, she challenged me safely, but she said, no, not everybody thinks about suicidal thoughts. And I was like, what?
It blew my mind when I heard that. I was like, what?
What? Because it was so ingrained in my thought process. Every day you think about it, you assume everybody else does, and that they can just handle it, and you can't. And it grows and grows in you, and you just see no way out. And that's the problem. You just see no way out. that people won't understand, because it's easy for us to say talk to someone, but what do I talk to you about? I don't understand what I'm dealing with.
Absolutely.
You know, and then you don't suffer, so how am I going to get that communication across, you know? And that's the hardest thing. It's when did I actually know? I think it's such a natural process. Do you really ever know? That would be my kind of telling.
Absolutely.
So if we had say 30 days, if we fell back that low, I know we've both worked very hard, me over 5 years, you similar process, to bring ourselves where we are, and I don't say I'm over it, I manage what happens to me, and you say the same. So if people were looking now and wondering, what do you do if you fell back in, what would be, say, the first 3 things you would do?
Absolutely. So it's actually really funny because we had a pretty tough day I had a pretty tough day on Friday, and straight away, all day, for the rest of Friday, all day Saturday, my thoughts went straight back into that suicidal ideation straight away.
Okay.
And the first thing I did was accept that it happened. Like, mental health is a cycle. We all go through phases in our life of ups and downs, and it just so happens that when I get down, my first thought is so much further down than, you know, what is typical. So the first thing I did absolutely was I went for a walk with my dog. Just getting out of the house, just getting a bit of fresh air. I always say that humans are a bit like plants. We just need a bit of fresh air, sunshine and water. We all need those days. I then spoke about it. Good. And that is something that's really important. I talked about my concerns actually with Will Ben. I said, you know, we've gotten this bad news, and this is what my first thought, like, really I went down to.
That's interesting there. The first thing you did, talking wasn't the first thing you did.
No.
Which is brilliant, because you have to be in the right place to talk.
Absolutely.
So you did something kind of fun first, walking your dog.
Absolutely. And it was by accepting that, you know, I am going through this. It wasn't trying to hide from the dark thoughts. It was just taking that first breath and saying, you know, I am actually going through a dark time at the minute. I need to go for a walk. I need to talk about it. I need a lot of sleep. I slept a lot over the weekend. The third thing of it. And I'm still not 100% now. And, you know, for World Suicide Prevention Day, I have come clean and I've said, you know, I aren't 100% still, but I'm working on it and I'm trying to overcome it.
Yeah. So you would tell people to kind of stop, accept what's happening right there and then, and like work. You can go back to work. You can do whatever after, so move away from it. And I'm the exact same thing. My first thing is stop. Stop everything, the busyness, everything, and move away from it, because you can't think logically in that scenario. I would say have fun, so I would go have a cup of coffee, just remove myself and just try to just wind it down a little, relax, and then eventually talk as well. I would be very similar. I would talk to someone and do talk, even if you don't know what to say, blurt something out. What and you guys agree with this, I think, writing it, even get the thoughts out on the paper, so go for coffee and write it down and fool your brain into thinking you're dealing with it. And so about 2 months ago, we had a tragedy in our family, and that was the first time in a couple of years where I went very low again and suicidal thoughts. But I had worked on myself so well over the 5 years that I was able to bring myself out. So you are going to dip. You are going to have those dips.
Absolutely.
You can't block them, you can't control them. Never try to control them, manage them. And then bring yourself back out. So again, fun is kind of a thing. Do something you like to do.
Absolutely.
Remove yourself, even if it's work, just remove yourself for a minute, a couple of minutes, whatever, and find something to take your mind off it, bring you back, and then do talk. I think that would be similar thought process. Yeah.
And I'm going to call you out on this. It's not fooling yourself. If you're writing in your journal, that isn't fooling yourself.
You're
that
fooling the brain.
I absolutely.
You're fooling the brain.
I know.
Trust me, this brain is thinking all the time, so I have to fool it some way. I go, ooh, peekaboo, you know.
I honestly, I do think though that journaling is a process. It's part of.
Oh no! But it's a process. But what I mean by that, so at night time if you can't sleep and you've anxiety, just write everything that's down your brain. So once it's down, that's what I mean. So your brain. No, sorry, that's what I mean, because I did loads of writing all the time. So I have, when I do presentations for the corporate sector, I bring my writings in to show what my day was like. So I get it out of my head, and you see what was in my head, and it does relieve it a little bit. It doesn't do everything you want it to do, but it does part of the job. And I think it's the accumulation of all these things we've said. So getting away, stopping, accepting what you have, realizing that it's going to happen, and stop asking why is it happening, you know, when's it going to stop. Deal with what you have to deal with right now, and then talk about it. So these thoughts may come back again, but we're ready for this, you know? And it's good to talk with people, I suppose, that have gone through it as well, you know?
And this is something that's so missing from the suicide conversation, that, you know, life is filled with ups and downs, and, you know, pretending that those downs don't exist is just, it doesn't help anyone. So by talking about it like we are today, by sharing our stories with everyone, and by having someone ask the questions that need to be asked, it tears down the walls of stigma. It tears down the fear around this conversation, because something that always comes up around this time of year, around World Suicide Prevention Day, is people are scared to ask me my questions about my history of suicide ideation, because they don't want to trigger it.
Exactly.
And I don't, like, it blows my mind, because, like, you won't trigger it, like, it's
there.
It's there, exactly.
Just,
and by talking about it and like not normalizing it, but like normalizing the questions around it, we can grow to understand it better.
You're so right, and that's the one question people say, oh, what do you say? And I always say, no, if you think someone is low and someone's suicidal, you ask them, because if you don't ask, you'll never know, and then you can't address their situation. But if you ask them, you're not putting it into their head, because trust me, it is there. It's been there a long time, and it's not going to, what it's going to do is going to say, Jesus, someone actually noticed me. And that will eventually maybe open them up, so you have actually saved them in a sense. So that would be, how's this for you? Is it making sense, or is it like, whoa?
It's a very interesting take, especially about, you know, saying that you would want to ask somebody, because from just my own perspective, it would make sense sometimes to think, oh, if someone's feeling bad, I don't want them to highlight how bad they're feeling. You know, I think a lot of people sometimes could be in denying the way that they feel, because they just try and ignore it. So you're saying that the best way is to not deny it, but to just accept it, and accept that you're feeling down in this moment.
I like to bring this back to physical illness, because I actually do think that physical health and mental health are very comparable. And I have quite severe epilepsy, and if I'm in pain, or I'm feeling weak after a seizure, or any of the consequences of epilepsy, I always find it so fascinating that people are so willing to talk about the pain I'm feeling neurologically. And it's so okay to ask me, you know, like, what's scary about a seizure? Like, tell me about it, tell me about that experience. But because of the stigma around mental illness, something that's quite comparable, the likes of being depressed, obviously suicide is quite a different concept, but, you know, it is still quite similar, that just by talking about it, you're not going to trigger a seizure, you're not going to trigger my darkness, you're just giving me an opportunity to vent and bitch about it. And doesn't everyone want to vent and bitch about stuff in life?
Very true. Look, and I suppose stigma for me is internal as well, because we think what people would think. So we're actually, I'm judging you, because I know you're going to judge me about this. So it's actually me judging. That's starting the whole process. So that's what it is, because they'll look down on me. But when I revealed it and I wrote my blog and stuff like that, you know, the support I got one email saying something else, but hundreds and hundreds of positive stuff. So people are willing, people are good, people are willing to help you, and it's just for you to do something, take that first step to somehow talk. It doesn't have to be verbal, it can be writing, or it can be, you know, shouting from the rooftop, whatever you need to do to let someone know. What we did before was a project, we took pictures to explain to people what our emotions were, or what we were feeling like, you know. It was pretty cool, so people got, whoa, an understanding, and then they were allowed to add their 2 pence to it, because they have their own interpretation of it, you know. So very interesting. Any more questions first, or are we have we run our time?
I think you've covered all the bases for me so far. If you had something to say to somebody who might be listening, who could be going through something similar, they're a little bit unsure of how they're feeling, what would you say?
I would say, if you had a broken leg, would you keep walking around on it all day, every day, and try to pretend like it's not there? Because I regularly compare this to having a broken leg. You know, if it's there, let's address it, let's accept that it's broken. And although it might feel like you're the only person in the world feeling this, and it is very isolating, remember that we all go through these dark times. Yes, you might be going through it darker than others, but it's the same process. You just need to stop, see that it's there, and realize that help is out there. All you need to do is ask.
For me, I am worth it. You are worth it. Aimée's worth it, because we don't think we are. We don't think we're fit in here, and we're meant to be part of this life. And you know how lonely that is, and lost, even though you have good support around you. It's just, you just feel everybody gets life and they have their purpose, and you're just going around in circles and you never can get out of that loop. But now I found myself, and I'm still going around in my little circle here, but I'm happy doing that because it's what I want. So you are worth it, and you know what, life is worth it. It's so hard at times, but I think we make it more difficult than it is as a society, as people, as an individual. And I think, yeah, you're worth it. So, you know, do what you have to do to stay here. And as Hamlet says, how do you know it's not worse on the other side? How do we know it's on the other side? So this could be our best option. So,
is this the only place we have dogs? Does the other side have dogs?
You know,
we don't know.
Where are you going? All right, so I suppose that's probably a wrap from us. This is Neil.
Hi.
Will, Ben, thank you so much, Aimée and Neil, for sharing.
She's high. She's high.
Sweet.
That's how she gets up.
Well, this is a great end to the show.
Thanks for listening, and we'll be in contact again soon. Bye.
Bye.